A is for Alcoholic is a program about recovery. My name is John, and I'm an alcoholic.
And my name is Jerry, and I'm an alcoholic.
Join us as we go through the alphabet of alcoholism, one letter at a time. Welcome back, all you sober knots. Thank you for
Sober knots.
like an astronaut. Like you.
I like to say former party people.
The
Post party. We're post party people.
the PPP.
Yeah.
Post party people.
The post party people. Trip P.
It's the after party. It's the long after.
The triple P. The three streams.
The streams like the Ghostbusters, like don't cross
Like
the
peeing.
streams. Oh, like peeing.
or when you're peeing in a urinal with your friend, don't cross the streams.
Don't cross the streams.
Yeah, don't do that.
The P that I'm thinking about, Jerry, is patreon.com
Bam.
/ AIFA. Thank you all Patreon supporters. You remember our good friend from back in the day, Danny Shu. She was one of the first ones to leave us. She's leave us a review. She is now one of our Patreons, so we're excited to have her there. If you're excited to be a part of the Patreon family, go over to patreon.com / AIFA. And if you're not, the best thing that you can do to help support us here is to give us a rating or leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Where do you listen to your podcast, Jerry?
I listen to the podcast app.
The podcast, so iTunes.
Yeah,
I
so
guess.
it's iTunes and Spotify sometimes
Yeah.
too. The podcast app, which it isn't working sometimes. When it isn't working. Usually Spotify and iTunes.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of ones, and we're working on getting our podcast out there. But what really helps us are the ratings and the reviews. Take a second, click on the little page, type up what you think. 5-star reviews only, please.
Yeah, talk about my silky voice and how
Yes.
it's kind of high for an adult man.
And then also our sponsor is Green Camel Press, comics, greeting cards, and more. That's the other business that I have, and we have a line of Christmas cards that are super awesome. We'll send you a little 5-pack of these cute little animals, little foxy Christmas fox, squirrels, owls, bears, snowmen, rabbits, all that good stuff. All the little forest animals. We also are going to be doing, if you're not familiar with us, go to greencamelpress.com and go check out our time-lapse video art, I guess you would call it, video
Yeah,
video
sure.
art.
I mean, call it what you want to.
We've been kind of trying to come up with a name, like a good name, like I want to call it like camel droppings or something like that, but
That's pretty good, dude. Yeah, camel droppings, dude.
But yeah, so we're going to start doing e-cards, personalized custom e-cards. So like say, Jerry, you wanted to have us create you something for your wife, and you say like you give me your wife's name and like what she's into, does she like tennis and her favorite color is red, and her favorite, animal is a dragon.
I don't know. Yeah, dragon.
So
She loves a piano by candlelight.
piano bike, and then what we do is we incorporate that all into the drawing, and we can send it out as a digital file, and cut it up, edit it, put it to music, and so you have this cool little thing that's super unique. I've never seen anything like it, and so it's up there.
That's awesome,
right? That's what I thought too. We were
for
really
the fucking digital age.
so
dude.
it's digital. It's hand drawn. We're old school aesthetic in a digital age, so it's all hand drawn. But then we chop it up, we video it, we chop it up, we add some music to it, make it super awesome, super personal, one of a kind, unique gift. GreenCamelPress.com. Go check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
So that
You got that whole spiel down good, man. I would not hit the skip 15 seconds through that ad at all.
No,
I would
no.
listen to that and be like, oh, this is part of the podcast.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
This is not an ad for Blue Apron.
You like how I slipped it in there? Green Camel.
Yeah. Green Camel.
So today on the podcast, X, the letter X, which was, I think, kind of a struggle. We had a few ideas for the letter X, but
It's weird. Nothing good starts with X, really. that
starts with
pertains
X.
to this. Yeah, that pertains to this podcast.
So there were ideas like X-ray from the inside out, or
right, or like xylophone. I got drunk and stole a xylophone.
If you got drunk and stole a xylophone, we would like to hear. I would like to hear that story, please.
I didn't.
No.
I stole lots of other things, but never a xylophone.
Well, if there's any listeners out there who did, we'd like to hear that story, and more importantly, your amends for that story.
Yeah. Let's put the safety net on it, because don't be fucking stealing xylophones, first off. But if you do, tell us.
Yes.
But don't do it again.
Don't do it again.
Apologize, learn from it, and don't do it again.
So we want to call this, we want to call the X, we're going to call it Solving for X. And what does that mean? Well, the idea is that alcoholism is most definitely a disease. We here at A's for Alcoholic believe that. It is its own full-standing disease. It has its own properties, its own personas. That being said, oftentimes there's underlying issues that either contribute to it, exacerbate it, or that the alcoholism springs from,
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a few of them, whether it's your upbringing, your environment, your family, lineage, your heritage. And I don't know if you feel, your parents were both alcoholics, right, Jared?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I come from a long line of proud alcoholics, which is funny, right? Now we can hop into it, because if you think about the genetic aspect of it, right? Because we hear that narrative a lot in recovery circles and in general, that you're more genetically predispositioned to have an addictive personality if it, you know what I mean, if it's in your family line. And I think about my siblings, and none of them are alcoholics. I have one sibling who doesn't drink at all whatsoever, not because she has a problem with drinking. She doesn't like the way it makes her feel, so she just doesn't drink, which just blows me away, because I'm like, really, you don't like what's wrong with your brain that you don't like the way it makes you feel?
Yeah.
So
well, that's just like blue eyes and blonde hair, and I mean that could just be something else that a gene she didn't get.
Well, and that's why I'm Hispanic, I'm half Mexican, and they're all brown, and I'm like the whitest dude in the family. Yeah. I'm whiter than my dad, who's a white guy. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's definitely a crapshoot. It really is just a big soupy mixture genetically. But I mean, god damn, there's so many factors. It's so complex, which is why it's kind of interesting. We're gonna do this podcast, and we're not gonna figure it out, but we'll talk about some shit.
Yeah.
Like
so let me ask you this. There's that the idea of they talk about, so is it passed on hereditary through the DNA? Is it something in the double helix? Or even like they talk about ancestral trauma. So you could be walking around with some fucking serious trauma from, generations ago that has led up to this. Or in a more, because I'm not a scientist and I don't know about the genome, but behaviorally, that stuff can get passed on very easily. So you can learn that shit.
Yeah.
That
is definite nature and nurture, right? I mean, I'm also the oldest in my family, so I was my parents' first attempt at starting a franchise. So, I could have picked up behaviors from them that maybe my other siblings didn't. And I also have to consider that my two youngest, there's four of us, the two youngest siblings I have, they were raised in a household with recovering alcoholics, so my parents were learning a new way on how to live, and they were, applying whatever life lessons they were learning, they were applying it to the raising children. I look at my little brother, and he's like really well adjusted emotionally, and you compare him to me, and it's just like night and day. You really do. I mean, I'm getting there. I'm getting better, definitely, but yeah. So it could be nature, it could be genetics. I think it's all, actually. It's not even could. It is, I think, nature and genetics. And what we talked about. I mean, when we talked earlier, you said, the alcoholism, which is interesting because I apply to the same belief system, is that alcoholism is almost a symptom of other outlying problems. Not to put the onus on you. I have some things to say as well, but I my question is depression. You've dealt with depression, and mental illness is definitely. Yes. I mean, you have been committed at least once. Twice.
At a very
but
young
I wasn't.
age.
I was not committed to being committed. Damn, that's some fucking Borch belt shit right there. Yeah, I mean, I suffer from clinical depression, and actually, since I've quit drinking, it doesn't come nearly as much, and it's not as profound as it was when I was in the throes of my alcoholism. But as a teenager, I wasn't an alcoholic. I was just full of hormones and a crazy person, which actually mirrored me during my worst drinking days. Like my worst moments, my worst bottoms, I was reverting exactly back to how I was when I was like a 16-year-old kid, almost exactly, as far as like what was going on inside my mind mentally. So yeah, I felt like, it's funny because we hear this this constant thing in the 12-step program we're in about how a lot of these alcoholics share their stories, and they always say how they always felt like an outsider.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And not being able to fit in, and that thing, it's so common. I hear it all the time, and I relate to that very much so. And that's how I felt as a young person, and then you double that with like whatever chemicals are rolling around inside my head, making me a little wacky, and whew, you got a cocktail right there,
And you have no idea how alcohol is going to react to any of that shit, any of those hormones or those feelings, or whether it was depression that was inherent in you, or for some reason growing up in a certain way or in a certain household or a certain environment or a certain community, or a certain stress level that comes with things like poverty. Right.
Oh yeah, and we were poor. I was real poor growing up. My mom always said like you were the only depressed 5-year-old I ever met, which always is fucking funny because I'm walking
Charlie
around
Brown.
like I had that whole fucking like Charlie Brown. Exactly. I have a Charlie Brown tattoo. I think it's because of that, actually. It's definitely because of that. I'm trying to think of the name of the TV show, but I'll come back. We'll circle around and I'll figure it out later. Yeah.
One day at a time.
No, it was the one with this. It was the TV show with the bald guy who was the psychiatrist in the 70s, and that's how I always felt like the theme song to that show was like sad as fuck. And he was a psychiatrist, and the TV show was his name. He was a comedian. Anyway, I can't.
Yeah.
Somebody out there is like making dinner, going, "Oh shit, that's so and so."
So and so.
Yeah, and then they did a spin-off of the show, and it was My Name is Daryl, and this is my other brother Daryl. You don't
Bob
remember
Newhart.
That? Bob Newhart. So this intro song to Bob Newhart was like the running soundtrack of my fucking childhood. It was like this sad piano song where you just kind of, and everything was drab and 70s and just kind of, it was, I mean, that's how I felt. I felt like a little Bob Newhart sometimes. No, because I guess Bob Newhart wasn't depressed, but you know what I mean? It was like that same feeling of like almost like the MASH soundtrack. We're pulling back.
I feel like
I'm pulling back all these
I feel
old
like
school.
Bob Newhart, I don't know if he wasn't not depressed, but he was very, I feel like there was some maudlinness to him. I feel like there was some underlying, he wasn't just a droll comic. I feel like there was a little bit of sadness there. There was a little, bit of untapped dreams and potentials in the character, at least,
Yeah.
But
so I guess what I'm trying to relate is that as a 5-year-old, the Bob Newhart song was basically like my jam. Like the song at the beginning, which if you hear it, it's like this sad piano fucking song. But yeah, I was like a sad kid.
And so when that depression finds alcohol for the first time, bam.
It actually cured it for a little while. I was doing much better when I found drinking. I got a little better for a little while. My mom would even, my family would comment like, wow, you've got a really good network of friends and you've got a great support group there and you seem to be doing all right. And, you appear to be in better spirits and like, and the reality was I love my friends from back then, but my support group was a bunch of dudes I fucking partied with.
Yeah.
Like it's not like we were sitting down backing each other up on our feelings or working through anything. We were just figuring out what the cheapest tequila was, and how much we could portion out to each one of us, I still hold those friendships very dearly though. Like I never wrote any of those people off. They mean a lot to me, but it's just funny because it worked for a little while in the beginning, but then you chronically use it. See, that's the rub. I mean, that's the rub of alcoholism.
Well, also, what's, the things that are manageable are things like waking up without a hangover, and you're like, God, this is amazing. There's no consequences.
Dude, yeah. Dude, my first few times waking up without a hangover, I felt like a Disney princess. It's like fucking Snow White with the birds flying down and shit.
You got there's no Snapchat, Instagram, there's no voicemail and text messages. You're just like, I got nothing to regret. Who knows what happened?
Right. Right?
So yeah.
I was just like out there dancing around the yard.
um so I think that I think a lot of it for me it stems from childhood. It has to. And I had a very abusive father, who a very abusive alcoholic for a father. And I want to
Yeah.
say, if I can start this story a little bit back. So my father was born in 1945. He's no longer
Wow.
with us, but when he was 6 months old, he contracted, he got pneumonia, and he got asthma. He contracted asthma because of that. So he was sick for his entire life. I say that
Yeah.
because, alcoholism, we're taught to look at it as a sickness when you see somebody who's dealing with it, and then to be actually physically sick on top of it, and to have, and I'm not excusing the behavior, which I want to talk about in a second, but just to kind of give you an idea of the story, he was sick all the time. Us kids were left home alone and told not to open the door at ages that you should not leave kids home alone, because he would be in the hospital. You know, it was
Right.
funny. We couldn't. He would leave us alone to go to the hospital, but he had no problem driving us to the mall, where he would go get hammered at Der Barons and drink the 101 beers around the world. Do you remember this?
Right.
Does this make
no,
any sense?
I don't know what the fuck you're
Okay.
talking about. Yeah, what the fuck's a Der Barons? Is that a Las Vegas
It was
thing?
it was like this beer hall in the mall, and he would go drink upstairs there, and then we would get a roll of quarters each, and we'd go down, just go to the arcade, and we would go and check in with him, and if he was, ready to drive us home after many beers.
Drunk?
Yeah, there was old green Volare that had this yellow streak across this red or yellow paint across one side, because of those big cement pillars that you're not supposed to run into.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he and I keep thinking back to, like, so his child, he was sick. He was dealing with things like taking all kinds of terrible medication to help him breathe that ended up rotting away every single one of his joints. But he was an alcoholic on top of it. And I have to imagine that he came, and I don't know a lot about my father's family, and my aunt just passed away too, and there's less and less that I know. But I have to imagine that there was a great deal of abuse in that family as well that was taught, and so I want to preface. So the story that I want to get to is about child abuse, and the story that I wanted to share is also when I was trying to think back to my very first drink. What was the very first time that alcohol ever touched my lips? And originally it was like, oh yeah, I remember in high school, and we had some drinks and somebody put on the Beatles, and it was like everything was magical all of a sudden. We were drinking Jack Daniels and whatever. And as I began to think back, there was a time, and I don't remember what the punishment, or I think I had spilled the white wine in the fridge, and in the crisper down below were like all these sprouts. Oh, and so one of the other things, my dad was really into video games because it helped him to escape the pain of all the fucking physical ailments that he was dealing with. So my punishment, and I was probably somewhere between fourth and seventh grade. So somewhere between 8 and 12. And I really can't tell, probably closer to 8. And so I remember my punishment was, and my brother was in trouble too. And so, I don't really want to talk about my brother's part in this, because I don't want to, out shit that he did, but it's kind of important. So I'll just say it anyway. So he made my brother sit naked on an ice cube on a bar stool that we had. And and I was forced to eat an entire bag of sprouts that was soaked in white wine.
Right.
And so coming to this realization of this moment that I had forgotten about, or had blocked out, it's like, at what point how does that affect a person, Not to mention the other physical abuse. And so getting away from that and having that level of stress and panic and anxiety and all the awful things that, and again, it's still something I struggle with, because like I said, he's gone, but I kind of have to look back and say, hey, maybe he was doing the best he could. And
Right.
forgiveness is for the person who forgives, right? It's not
Yeah.
necessarily for the other person. So I'm still working on those. But, and I've had many decades to think about this, but all that kind of stress. And once you ball that all up and you go like, what kind of person does that create except somebody who is scared and anxious and who doesn't know how to, deal with people, who doesn't know how to deal with themselves, who is harboring resentments. And, we've said this before, like, you don't even know what the fucking word resentment means, you know what I mean, as a little kid. And
No,
so
you don't. Yeah.
you're just frustrated and you just want to scream and you can't go anywhere and you're not in control of anything in your life. And and that didn't trigger any sort of like, I need to drink more. It was, and I don't think that it was necessarily the opposite. It was just a disgusting, horrible thing that I had to do. Totally fucked up and pretty dark. And the entire time my dad's like in the living room playing Legend of Zelda or whatever. Like it was just, it was a fucking weird scene. And it's one of those weird scenes that, as much as I imagine I'm the only one who ever went through anything like that, you end up meeting people and you're like, oh shit, I wasn't the only one. Yeah. And so I think that that's something that alcoholics like that brings to recovery, is meeting other people and going like, oh, I'm not alone. Even in the weirdest fucked up thing that has happened to you or you have done, for alcohol or because of alcohol or. So I really feel that the childhood traumas that I have gone through and possibly, that my father has gone through and his father before him, because I can't imagine that it just started with me,
No, I think that was also something handed down.
So
yeah.
I think that is a huge thing. And that if my childhood had been different, if my childhood had been happier, if my childhood had been kinder, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I can't. There's no way to really say.
I mean, yeah.
But I also wouldn't be
one of those things where you can't really. Who the fuck knows?
I don't know, but I do know that it definitely affected my drinking.
Yeah.
And just having somebody who had alcohol in the house all the time. And
this is a real trip, because I remember when you were trying to quit drinking, you were considering quitting drinking, you called me up drunk. And I was in the garage downstairs and you kept saying, well, I don't know if I want to, I don't know, Jerry. And then you said, maybe I don't want to stop. Maybe I want to find out why I drink so much. And then I remember telling you, John, if your house is on fire, you need to get the fuck out of your house. You don't figure out how the fire started. But now, through the magic of fucking recovery and sobriety, you're starting to figure out why you drank so much, brother.
Going through the charred remains of my childhood.
Yeah, now it's the house is finally done burnt down. Now you can go through all that shit and suss it out, and then from there, what do you do with that? How can you make that a productive thing or a positive thing, or how can you just regard it and say that was that and this is now? It's all it even ties into what we're talking about as far as like what are the causes, or what, because there's so many and every person is an individual. It'd be impossible to say this is exactly what it is, or it's all genetic, or it's all a mental a mental illness or whatever. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
I mean, I think mental illness plays a big role in it, and especially
absolutely does. It absolutely does. Yeah. Because, on your end, it's funny because we don't mirror, but we're at least two sides of it. Whereas mine was very heavily rooted in mental illness. Yours is rooted in, you know what I mean? Like past trauma, it's like we should start a superhero team or something. Just be like past trauma and depressed man, and just
past trauma.
Like you got a healing factor, and I make the room darker. Like I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you know about Joy Division?
It's a couple of bros with a keg. Turn the lights down.
Turn the lights down.
Yeah, man. It's just and that's yes. I've always wanted to know why. I've always been curious because I've always been a little more. And not all, I shouldn't say always, but I try to be a self-aware human being. And
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think in those last few years of drinking, and I probably called you, that was probably 2014. So it was probably, a year before, or maybe a year and a half before I quit. So, or had to
Yeah,
be
it
a
was
year.
like right around it was around this time of year actually, because my wife was here and my mother-in-law was here, and they had come up in like November, so it might have been around this time of year.
But I've always wanted to know more about why. And I thought that, if I just knew why, then I could fix that. And then I
That's
could
the
still
key,
drink.
right?
Right?
Yeah, that's it though. That's the key.
That was what-
I have the Excalibur. Now I can use this Excalibur to just continue my drinking career, and then my drinking will be healthy.
Right. And then as
Right.
long as if I fix myself, and so there's lots of things, and I'm supposed to write a letter to my father and send it off and, say all the things that I've wanted to say, and I haven't done that. And so there's lots of things that I still need to continue, but it's not also, I don't think that if I fix these things that I will ever just go ahead and be able to go back to, I'll have a smart cocktail and
Nice
before dinner.
chartreuse
Yes,
with lunch.
nice chartreuse with lunch.
There's never been a nice chartreuse ever.
I've had chartreuse with
I know you
lunch.
can disagree, but
But-
yeah, so have I. I've had chartreuse with breakfast, but I don't think it was ever nice.
No.
It was never nice. No,
It's like cat piss and fucking dog farts.
I don't know what it was like eating a marker
Yes.
that fell in grass.
And as a bartender, I used to use it all the time in cocktails, man. It was like this little thing, and people were like, ooh, what is that? And I'd say, well, let me tell you about the chartreuse. Made by monks in the 1600s. And
This is fucking foot medicine. It's just like that Unterberg. It was like my grandma's foot medicine. I drink it though.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So even
drink
with,
it out of
like-
a foot.
yeah, drink it out of her foot. So even with all those like underlying issues that, we talk about, your upbringing, your mental illness, your childhood traumas, all that stuff.
Desire to fit in.
Desire
Yeah,
to
all
fit
that
in.
stuff.
That's another big
Yeah.
one. And I
Yeah.
did that all through high school. I mean,
It's
even
very tribal.
Mhm.
Yeah, very tribal.
that was the thing when I met you guys, and I was like, oh man, this is perfect. They don't care. They
Ah, we're drunk. They're drunks too.
yeah, I was like, oh, they love me for who I am, and I think that there was a certain level of that for all of us, but it was also
Right.
we were not going to judge each other for our drinking. There was never.
No.
We'd make fun of each other, but there'd be no judgment as long as we could get
No.
another drink.
Right.
So
We're all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
so that was a relief, and so that's another thing that I love about recovery is you're like, oh, you're just like me.
Right.
You're broken but trying to fix it, and but all those other underlying things aside, there's still in me that indelible desire, that craving, maybe not craving so much anymore, but the desire to drink.
Yeah.
And I don't ever see that changing. And I don't ever see myself going, and I don't say this, capriciously. Is that the right word? I don't say this,
I think so.
capriciously.
Sure.
That
Why
like,
not?
hey, I'm not going to drink, or I'll never drink, or I don't, I can't, I don't know that that's the fact, but
Right.
there may come a day where the craving takes hold, or I think that I'm fine, and I try to safeguard against that by continual.
Well, yeah, dude.
Maintenance.
It's super dangerous to say you're never going to do the thing that you did for like 20 fucking years straight and that you just stopped doing just a couple of years ago. I always think that's shady as fuck. Even people with multiple years sober who are like, I'll never touch alcohol again. I'm like, just don't say it. Just don't do it. You don't got to convince me, dude. I'm not putting your ass on trial. I'm sitting here in this church basement with you, dude.
Don't talk about it. Be about it.
Just be about it, homie. Yeah.
I'm sitting in this church basement with you. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, we're just both down here. Like, you saw those fucking dog kennels behind us?
Yeah.
Why are there dog kennels in the basement of the church, first off? And this is from a true life story. But anyway.
Were there dogs
Yeah,
in the dog kennels?
You know what? It was this warming center, because here in Eugene, they have the warming centers for the homeless folks. Because we got like a whole homeless thing going. We got a whole party here. And whenever the city freezes, they have to not freeze to death, so the churches open up the basements.
Yeah.
I guess homeless people got dogs.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't guess. I see it. They got dogs. So then they take the dogs to the church and put them in the kennel and
Yeah.
hang out. And I don't know, figure it out, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why the dog kennels were there. Sometimes even the one group I had to go to every once in a while had to do the meeting in different parts of the church because there'd be people sleeping all over the floor in the room we would normally in, and then the church would sequester us to some weird back room that would be full of old Reader's Digests. Why the fuck does the church need all these Reader's Digests?
Somebody got a subscription, man, and it's just
like
kind of
hundreds of them, dude.
They've been getting subscribed.
Yeah.
They've subscribed since the 60s.
Ah, the good old days of 2014, 15.
It's but yeah, I don't see that fixing any of these things is going to change the intrinsic quality of the alcoholism itself.
Right. What do they say? You can't turn a pickle back into a cucumber.
No, you can't.
Yeah, so even if you figure out how the pickle was made and where it was from and what kind of pickle the cucumber it was, it's not going to turn it back. You know what I mean? Like what's been done can't be undone.
No.
But what you can do shit to avoid making it worse though.
Yes.
Getting deep over here.
There's a quote on my wall. I have had it for there. A friend of mine wrote it, but it says, there is no problem so bad that alcohol can't make worse.
Word.
Can't make even worse.
I hear that all the time. It's the fucking truth, man. It's the fucking truth.
So whenever I have a problem that I need to solve, or I'm in a sticky situation, or not a sticky situation, because those don't really happen too much unless I'm like eating peanut butter out of the jar.
Right, those raw fucking sweet potatoes.
Well, I mean, those are pretty easy. If you don't want to put too many holes in them, you just enough to let the air out. Otherwise, all the sugar comes out. But
the sweet potato.
Yeah,
right,
but I had one the
yeah.
other day on the road, man. I bagged it up and I was like eating it out of the Ziploc bag. It got me through with a day. I was out and it's a low calorie snack. I'm telling you.
I had sweet potato fries tonight with dinner. But yeah, I thought of you. Just in the burnt down hills of Sonoma eating a sweet potato out of a Ziploc bag. Just talking to the cats. I don't know if any of you guys follow John on Instagram, but all his stories are always animals he finds around his neighborhood. He's like fucking Dr. Doolittle.
You should follow me on Instagram. It's
so many dogs just escaped from their yards on your walks.
There was 2 of them out today, and they were just like barking. They I don't know if they wanted to play or if they were just like, "Hey man, keep walking."
Yeah.
But so I see a lot of animals. There's deer out here. There's cows. There's lots of dogs, cats sometimes.
And you video them all and put them on your Instagram.
They're my Instagram stories, man. So if you want to see the animals that I encounter with some
that you come upon, well, no, not come upon, that you come across.
That I come across.
Yeah, not upon.
Go check me out at Sonic John.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to the point of solving for X and finding out what that means and what it means to you. Do you find that, so on top of depression, now you also, you lived in both households, one where you had parents who were practicing alcoholics, and then during recovery. Yeah. So I'm curious, when you, like, say we go back to your wedding, but even earlier, but I just remember your parents who had been sober for a long time were like, how much booze should we
decades.
get? And they were like all about, like, these people drink, we're going to throw a party. But when they first got into recovery and you were younger, did it affect how they talked about it? Or when you started drinking, were they...
I don't know, man. Because I was 12, right? When my dad got sober, I think it was 1989. Okay. So I was actually like almost 14.
And you hadn't started drinking yet.
Dude, I was 14. I hadn't started drinking yet. And my mom didn't get sober till I was like 17 or 18.
Okay.
So my parents were still married and my mom was still drinking while my dad was sober, you know.
Jesus.
My father has a lot of patience and he has a lot of practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad, I don't want to out my dad, but I guess I did. But he's really open about it anyway. But yeah, I think by the time they both were actually working the program together and I was gone already. I was out of the house. I was already like in Tucson and then up here in Eugene. But I mean, there were the way they spoke about it was different. I remember my dad just quit drinking. Like he just the shit went down in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He fucking, I don't know, man. Like we didn't really talk about meetings. I was 14. I was so self-centered. I didn't even think about it. I didn't talk about AA or meetings until I got much older. And you know, the language changed more with my mom. because my mom was much more vocal about it. My old man did his thing and it kept him straight. You know what I mean? And it, like, after a while, he saw that he was reaping benefits from it. It wasn't even just financial benefits. Like, emotionally, he was being able to navigate his life in things got smoother, and then he just kind of was a lot easier at taking things the way they came. But my mom was more vocal, especially with all the lingo and talk of the 12-step program. She'd be like, easy does it, and one day at a time, and there before the grace of God. I grew up with big books. I mean, not big books. I grew up with grapevines on the toilet tank. Take a dump and read the fucking grapevine.
But it didn't affect you, or you didn't think about it in a different way when you were. I mean, and they didn't seem. It was never a concern when you were in your 20s and even your 30s, like drinking.
I don't think I was not really open about drinking that.
Yeah.
I smoked a lot of pot in my 20s, so that was more my jam. Alcohol at that point was something I really loved, but it was one of those things that was like, it was harder to get because I was underage. And I wasn't really willing to go out there and knock on fucking car windows and be like, buy me a 40, because I could get weed way easier. I grew up on the border to Mexico, man. It just falls out of the sky in a bale,
Welcome to Nogales.
You know what I'm saying? It's when I turned 21 and it became accessible. As a matter of fact, it's right around the time I started hanging around with you. In my like early 20s, like 22, 23, is when I realized that I was old enough to just go to the fucking liquor store. Like, I didn't have to play any more games. I didn't have to go to Mexico and drink in a bar with all the dudes who beat me up in high school. Like, I didn't have to fuck with any of that. Like, my wife partied in Mexico like crazy, and so did my sisters, Like, they went out dancing and shit. And, like, I never went to the bars in Mexico because I was a nerd in high school and a punk rocker, and I got beat up for that shit. But at 23 in Eugene, Oregon, where being a nerd and punk rocker was actually like a benefit, I was like, well, I'm going to tear the fucking wheels off this thing. And I proceeded to do that. But their language, the way they treated us, I think, like I said, my siblings saw more of that than I did. Because I think once whatever discipline they were using in their lives, once they started really using it, I was already out of the door.
Right.
Yeah.
So you unfortunately didn't reap any of the benefits. I don't want to say that. I mean, because I've met them both, and they're wonderful people.
They're fucking cool as hell. I think I don't know. I don't want to place blame on them for anything. I mean, they were kids, dude.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing. You talk about your childhood. Like, we both come from pretty, I don't even know if our circumstances are necessarily unique. There's so many stories out there in this country and in this world, But yeah, my mom was 17 years old when I was born. My dad turned 18 the day I was born. They were fucking kids.
Yeah.
Dude, me at 18, I couldn't even... Fuck, dude, I couldn't keep anything alive. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how they did it with me. They were fucking little kids. Yeah, so, I mean, they had a lot on their hands. And then they made 3 more. So there's 4 of us running around, Yeah.
I just remember knowing that, like, your parents were in recovery, and it never came up as a point of discussion.
They just lived their lives.
Yeah, it was your wedding, and they were like, how many gallons of bourbon and gin and vodka should we get? And I had a conversation with your dad,
because you were the bartender. Yeah.
And I said, a lot of people don't drink gin, so maybe just one of those big bottles, but definitely get like a lot of vodka and a lot of tequila, and probably not as much bourbon. But Jerry drinks bourbon, but how much bourbon can one person drink?
All of it.
So it was it was a trip to me that they were like super cool with it. And I never once thought like, oh, they're around this, or I never really thought about their perspective. And like you said, they were probably just like, yeah, man, this is their wedding, not ours. And we're just hosting it at our place.
They always had booze though in the house. Like, not always, but they had booze in the house.
For like guests.
Yeah, dude. Whenever I came home, my mom would buy me a handle of Jim Beam. Like, when I'd come home to visit, it was just it's so it's so embedded in the culture I grew up in. I guess just being an American in general, it's in the culture, But it is so embedded in that culture on the border there. I mean, people fucking drink. It's what they do. Yeah, that was just normal. It was just normal.
And I grew up in a little bit of a different kind of desert, but it was pretty much the same thing. I mean, you would think growing up in Las Vegas, the strip doesn't really give much appeal when you're 16. You're like, you walk up and down the strip, you're not allowed in anywhere, and maybe your friend's mom, who is a cocktail waitress, can get you a cherry Coke. Like, it's not. But it was definitely a lot of like, what can we get, how much can we get, and where can we go drink it, and it was just thing. And I did a lot of that knocking on windows. And
yeah, man, I just couldn't do it.
We call it fishing, and so we just go, sit in the 7-Eleven parking lot. And I remember there was a bunch of the one time I got these guys to do it. It was a group of Mexican workers, and they were in their truck, and there were 3 of them. And I was trying to talk to them, but they didn't speak a lot of English, and I didn't speak any Spanish. And I was trying to like explain to them Boone's Hill Farm.
Oh my God!
And I was like, and I had all the money, and I had extra, and I was like, I need 9 bottles.
Yeah.
And it was this whole thing of like trying to get these guys, and they're pulling them out of the cooler and then looking at me through the window like, is this the right one? And they were so helpful. They were so like, I don't know. It was a fucking nightmare. We got it.
Why are you drinking Boone's Farm?
So
what are you
we
doing?
packed it all in a guitar case, in a soft guitar case, and walked it to the park.
Yeah. Damn.
So there wasn't a whole lot to do. I mean, I think there really wasn't a whole lot to do when I grew up there. As soon as I left Las Vegas is when they started getting all super artsy and good music scene and all this shit,
Yeah.
So I missed
like
that.
the day you left, the Killers formed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It was like the Crystal Method and Slaughter were from there or something, but
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into an alcoholic, into the making of an alcoholic. I don't think that it's just it's one little gene and an analogy.
It's not. It's far more complex than that. And if we're working off the literature of our 12-step programs, they weren't quite. You know what I mean? It was written so long ago that it's hard to suss all of it out. I thought we were gonna figure it out, but we didn't. So. Yeah.
Well, I think the one thing you figure out is you just don't drink.
Yeah, no, I thought we were going to figure it out in this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
The answer to alcoholism.
Ah.
I don't know if I've even figured out recovery yet. I'm still doing it. I think the day I figure out recovery is the day that I kind of stop having fun with it, because I think the fun part of recovery to me is always recovering every day. You recover, you get better.
You feel better.
Yeah, and then the one day I'm like, I'm all fixed. I'm bullshit. There's still something wrong.
There's other things, and so it's always those other things of progress, not perfection, and trying to figure yourself out. And it's a lot. It's fucking exhausting, and we are complicated creatures, human beings in general.
We are.
Then you throw alcoholism on top of it,
and any other type of addiction. But alcoholism is the whole reason we're doing this podcast, man. Yeah.
So, and I think in closing, solving for X is a big thing, and it's different for everybody, and yet there's so many similarities when you start talking about it to people. So
yeah,
I think it's important to share. I think it's important to listen.
Yeah, definitely listen.
I thought about you the other day, and I was sitting in a meeting, and I was just like contently listening to people, and I know that you said that's what a lot of what you do, and I was gonna say something, and somebody else piped up first, and they said exactly what I was thinking, and I was like, God damn,
yeah,
that's the magic right there.
Right, like I don't even need to say this shit. It's funny because if people do listen to this and they hear me talk so much, if you're in a meeting with me, like I don't fucking say anything. I love to listen, but then they're like, open your mouth and help, and I'm like, you already said all the shit I wanted to say, dude. I'm not following you. You're a hard act to follow, sir.
Right?
Yeah.
You're like the fucking Seinfeld of meetings.
Yeah, the rooms, right? Yeah. Waka waka.
But yeah, so if reach out to us, aisforalcoholic@gmail.com. You go to the website, you can hit us up at Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. But
hell yeah.
I think it's important to share, and I think it's important. I love that, we live in a time where you can be open about these things, and it's actually celebrated rather than kind of swept under
shunned
the rug.
Or made you feel ashamed for. Yeah, we can actually. You know what's embarrassing is this entire podcast I've been wearing a Von Dutch hat I found in a box I found a box in my closet. I've been wearing this Von Dutch hat all day.
What's it
from
smell
2003.
like? Yes.
Smells like Von Dutch, man. Smells like 2004.
Smells
That's
like
from
Axe body
2004.
spray and
It's like a $50 hat that I got off of like a girl I used to date.
a thong that Fred Durst once wore.
Boom, that's what it smells like. The old Motorola Razor or whatever. The Hello, is that a Motorola
Yeah,
Razor?
yeah.
It was. Those shits were dope. Anyway,
So
yeah, we could. That'll be our other podcast. Yeah, mid 2000 nostalgia with Johnny and Jerry.
wow.
Ow, are you down with the sickness? That's what the podcast will be called.
Yeah, stay cool, stay sober, and
Yeah.
we'll talk to you
Stay in
next
school.
time.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.